Yeah.
I like, yeah, you guys are just, I think, just skipping over a whole level of analysis here. Slowing something down, right, doesn't mean like pulling it backwards. It only means bringing its excess momentum upward to a halt, back down to basic. You're not if everything's moving at a constant rate upward, and you already have all that conserved momentum going upward. So if you add additional speed to that, you can move ahead of it. But you've never lost anything. What you guys
You lose it in
haven't
the
ever addressed
friction.
is what you no yeah, you lose it in the friction, and that's why you rise up to a certain point and then come to a halt.
Right, because
Yeah,
otherwise
yeah.
the friction, should you not have jumped, would be able to retard you below the Earth, which makes no sense. So I think the point that, correct me if I'm wrong, Funder here. I think the point that you're making is the friction is only able to stop the delta that you've inputted into the system by jumping, but it
Yeah,
can't
the
it
X.
can't remove the fundamental of, in this case, the upward moving Earth. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Do you agree?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so like I said, you'll just find yourself hovering in the air if the Earth was rising up at a constant rate. There's nothing that's ever gonna bring you back down.
No,
What's
dude, what?
Dude, that's actually a great point, bro. Like
No,
the
it's not.
conservation of it is though, because the conservation of energy and momentum would dictate that. So like you're
Wouldn't
gonna have
that
to
be in a
claim
vacuum though, Witsit?
why? Why the conservation of energy and momentum doesn't only apply in a vacuum. Vacuums don't even really exist.
Well, that's what we're talking about, the frictions, right? If there's
Yeah, but
frictions,
the air's moving up. The air has to be universally moving up as well, right? I mean, the sky does, to be honest. So
yeah, but it's okay. The air is moving up, yes, in relation with the Earth rising, right? But it's uniform. So
right, so like you're on the ground, you're not uniform with the Earth because you can take a step. So
Yeah,
you're gonna
so
move up.
when you jump, you're gonna slow down, you're gonna lose your momentum, and then since the air below you can't support you, the Earth is gonna catch you.
There's gonna be a net velocity addition if
Hey,
you jump.
I have an analogy that might help. So imagine you're in a. You're gonna have to bear with me a little bit here. Imagine you're in a swimming pool that's on a track and it's moving in a direction, constant speed. You're at the back end of this, and you push off. The water's gonna stop you. The reason you have to bear with me is some of these things that would happen in real life we can't employ into this system. But you would push off, you'd get maybe 10 meters, and then the water would stop you. But the track's still moving, the water's still moving, everything's still constant. You stay in that position. That's a kind of analogy to what Fundy is saying. But instead, flip it
Yeah,
vertical and call it the Earth.
I
maybe
mean,
I'm
it
missing
really.
something. Maybe
Nah,
I'm
you're
missing
not.
something. Well, just like let's just make sure, right? I'm happy to be missing something here, but so wouldn't there just be a velocity addition?
Right, and then the air you're moving upwards through, once you've jumped off of a single speed moving upward Earth, the only thing slowing that speed you initially jumped off the surface with would be air resistance, which would then just leave you in a hovering state some amount of feet above the Earth once the air resistance slowed you down, remove your excess momentum. But then at,
Yep,
at that point,
I
everything's just
agree.
uniformly moving upward again. And then buoyancy would, maybe take effect at that point, but buoyancy wouldn't have enough, I don't know, viscosity or force to bring you back down at the rate that we witness every day in all of our everyday
So, like,
lives.
yeah, in theory, you could have a little jetpack, so you could jump up off the ground, and then you start to hover, and you could hit your jetpack to make another jump, and you could just climb your way up to the sky.
It's like a neutrally buoyant object in a consistently dense medium. You fire up the jetpack or whatever you do. You rise up a little, but there's still nothing to bring you back down. You're just sitting in the medium right
Because in
there,
order for it to
however high
bring
you
you back
rise
down,
to.
yeah, because in order for it to bring you back down, it couldn't be passive like the resistance. It would have to be an active, something active
Yeah, it would literally
to
have to be
revert.
like a counter motion. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I would up to this point I would have always said that my strongest refutation of the upward moving Earth is interferometry measurements. But I'm not gonna lie, bro. The law of conservation of energy trumps that. Like, I think it takes first place. Like, if you have a position counter to that, like, that's one of the greatest reputations of the spinning globe is the law of conservation of energy and momentum when it comes to the Atmos, the proportionate relationship between distance from the center and the speed the Atmos would have to move to maintain its relationship with the Earth, right? So you have to have energy introduced. That's such a death blow to the spinning globe. Like, this is, like pretty significant.
We don't consider it a death blow. We think it's perfectly explainable.
But you can't
Before we move on,
right? Like if you
before we
believe,
move on to that,
can I just make one sentence in response to that? If you believe that something is perfectly explainable, but you're incapable of explaining it, then that's a weird position, and that's not something I want anything to do with, bro.
Right. You're right about that.
Yeah.
well, before we move on to that, I would find it much harder to argue against an accelerating upward moving Earth. Of course, the implications of that I don't like on a sort of ethical level. I don't even know what to call it. Like, oh, well, we'd be going
Yeah,
so
like an
fast.
intuitive level. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
but I mean, I'd have a much hard time physically arguing against that idea. But a constantly moving upward one, I mean, there just has to be some sort of secondary force that works in tandem that attracts you to the ground, which I'm okay with. But that's the consequence of applying this theory to reality. There has to be some sort of secondary thing at work other than just alone an upward moving ground.
That's why
That'd be electrostatic
electromagnetism.
attraction or something. Yeah,
That's
that,
why
that could be the case.
everybody I've heard talk about it still says that electromagnetism
You're
exists.
not stealing. Sorry. You're
What
just
about
not
on-
stealing. You're not stealing, man. You're not still manning the upward moving Earth, guys. They say like the upward moving Earth is what makes you fall. Like that's just like.
But that's
What?
whenever anybody says that, it's a classical misinterpretation of the fact you need an accelerating upward moving Earth.
And what does that have to do with velocity addition anyway?
And they have another big problem is that if it's the force that whatever it is that brings you down is the consequence of an upward moving Earth, that doesn't explain why that force, that downwardness in its magnitude is different at different altitudes and different locations on the surface of the realm we live in.
And
That
at the
can't be
same
the case.
and at the same location on the surface at different times. So
Cool. So it all gets broken by that. They don't know. They don't understand that even in that premise, and they think, "Oh, just moving up would be enough." It's the analogy.
yeah, but I
is an
think this
elevator.
argument's better. I think this argument's even better. So, like, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm overlooking something. Anyone that believes the Earth's moving up or that it could be, can someone like explain what I'm missing here? If you were to jump up, conservation of energy and momentum dictates that there would be a velocity addition.
When have you ever witnessed something be pressed against and never stop moving? When have you ever witnessed that? Witsit?
Well, I don't understand the relevance of that response.
Because it doesn't exist. Somebody made it up.
What does that have to do with the fact there would have to be a velocity addition based on the conservation of energy?
The truth of
We
the
all
matter,
believe in
the truth of the matter
velocity
is
addition
this.
in a year.
Things-
In a year, it will be faster than the speed of light.
what?
I don't even care about any of that. No.
That's not
I'm
what we're
talking
talking about.
No, I'm not talking about that.
That's
I'm
not what
talking
we're
about
talking about.
yeah, we're talking about if you stood on the surface and jumped up. Okay, prior to you jumping up, you're moving with the Earth. Once you jump up, you've introduced additional energy to separate from the Earth.
Witsit is
So
it your
now
claim that,
It's
that
so,
things
it's
will
so
move
simple.
forever?
You would have a velocity addition. Can we all just agree on that part before we move to the next part? Like we can agree we would have to add two
Hey, man.
velocities.
I've been trying to make that point for the past hour and a half. So good luck.
Well,
Okay.
this would be simple. We should all agree. You may think that is explainable. That's one thing, but we can all agree we would have to add the velocities.
You're adding.
I'd agree with that.
Yes,
Okay.
you're adding a velocity.
Okay, so you explain to me in terms of physics, based on the law of conservation of energy, as you're moving with it, you're maintaining that momentum, and then you're going to add to it with an additional velocity. Explain to me how we just go right back to the equilibrium.
Because you're going to slow down. You slow down.
Okay, then wait, we slow down. and
Then you're
the
going to
Earth
find
catches
yourself
up to it.
hovering up in the air at whatever, because the only thing slowing you down is the air resistance. So wherever you come to rest, once the air has had its way with you, is just going to be the height that you're hovering above the surface, never to step foot on the ground ever again.
No, I know how to go about it. I know how to. Wait, real fast. Trust me here.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah.
How are you going to keep hovering when the air below you can't support you? You came to rest.
See, you don't get it. Dude, this is what I was trying to interject. I was trying to interject. When you say you'll slow down, right? You'll slow down relative to what?
Relative
to moving Earth.
And what else?
Relative to the velocity that you just added.
The air. If you jump in the air, right? You're going to jump in the air? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to slow down relative to the moving Earth and the air. The air is the problem you have here because it's separate. It has resistance and friction. It's its own reference frame. Although you're claiming that it's basically moving in tangent with, which I'll be honest, in and of itself is insane to me to try to wrap my mind around. Do you see the point I'm making?
I see your problem that you're making.
I don't see it at all.
Well, what is it?
I think Witsit.
I can't answer you because your buddies keep talking every time I try.
Go ahead, Skilly.
What's the problem I'm making with the air?
So you're saying that you can throw an object in the air and it'll lose that initial velocity, but once it gets back to its starting point, then it should maintain its velocity if the Earth was rising. That's what you're claiming, correct?
If it landed back on the Earth, and yeah, why would it not?
Yeah, so you're already putting pressure on the object. When you're holding the object, you're traveling with the Earth, you're pressing against the object. It's already being compressed. When you press against a spring, what happens? It compresses the spring. When you let it go, it equilibrates.
Okay,
You're
what does that do with you returning?
You're pressing against the object. You let it go. It's all of that compression and resistance to motion starts to equilibrate.
Sure, but what does that have to do with you returning, though?
Because it loses its momentum. Once it's no longer traveling up, then the Earth can catch up to it.
So
that's only if the law of conservation of momentum doesn't exist and the ether is a type of molasses.
And that's why I said, have you ever pushed something in this reality and it never stopped moving? Have you ever seen that? Name one thing that does that.
No. Okay, so that is a very talented gotcha, but I've already addressed it by saying that a fidget spinner in a vacuum will spin to the precise amount of length of time, with the only thing bringing it to a halt at the predictable measure time being the friction. There is no there is no anti momentum thing, and people have gotten angry at me for saying this, but the only way to say it is a molasses type of ether. There's no evidence for a molasses ether that slows things down.
There's
I
nothing.
think that's not the issue here, Bundy. Maybe you think that conservation of momentum is forever. I think that's what you think. Am I correct?
That is exactly what the conservation. Yeah, if you're in an infinite zero G abyss, if you're in an infinite zero G abyss and you throw a rock at 10 miles per hour, it'll move in one direction at 10 miles per hour forever in that direction.
That's a fantasy thing that came from Newton. There's absolutely no proof. He's absolutely right in this. This is the issue. There's absolutely no proof that something will travel forever. So your idea of conservation of momentum is faulty. Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're saying it's trash, but the reason it's a thing is a specific reason. Can you explain? Can you give us an actual example of something losing its energy without an outside force acting on it?
No, the onus would be on you to show the opposite, because everything
I already described
the reason logically. Let me explain. The reason that logically it wouldn't be is because you're claiming an exception to a universal principle.
The reason it would be is because you guys originally started with the claim that objects accelerate down. That's the original claim. That's why the onus is on you, Witsit.
No, that's not sequitur to the third law here. The law we're talking about.
Well, this is where the trees branched out, brother.
Isn't
that's
friction
the problem.
Taking away of energy in part of that?
You are convinced it's a law. I claim it's not a law. It cannot be shown. This thing that you believe conservation of momentum, things traveling forever, is false.
Hey, but
Then
let me
why
just
can
make
I?
sure. Sorry,
Then
go ahead.
why can I perfectly predict the time a fidget spinner will stop rotating inside of a vacuum?
Because you probably spinned it a bunch of times and tested it.
Do you understand
Sure.
that's not what it's based on? The fact he assumes it'll go forever without the friction. Then we take the friction into account and we can know when it's going to stop. What I'm trying to explain to you guys, dude, the reason it's a law, and it's not an easy law to just say nuh-uh to, by the way, it's very important, is because to claim that it isn't the case would require a special pleading position. Because a special pleading is saying, well, this is the one anomaly to a universal principle. It's the one exception to what always happens every other time that we actually have access to. That's fallacious. Obviously,
Hold
for
on.
obvious
Based on a
reasons.
faulty premise, bro. It's
Hold
based
on.
on a faulty premise to begin
on.
with.
So, isn't a physical law supposed to be something that always happens?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. When does conservation of energy not happen?
Always. It
All the
never
time.
happens. Yeah.
What?
When can you ever demonstrate something,
What?
an object remaining in motion forever? When can you
time
ever?
out.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
Wait, time out. Okay, so if I'm on like a moving object, we agree that if I jump off of it because of the conservation of energy and momentum, I'm going to move forward based on the direction that the object was moving.
Yeah, but you overpower.
Until when?
It's just a yes or no.
For how long?
Yes.
Okay, we agree. So the principle behind the actual conserving of the momentum, we all agree on. Okay,
That's not forever though.
in every scenario that we have access to, there is friction.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
So how do you
That's our
think
point.
of a scenario?
Let me finish explaining it.
I've made this
it's
point
like you
100
guys,
times tonight.
yeah, it's like you
It
guys
hasn't
don't
worked.
understand the reason it's a law, though. So not in every time that we observe it, there is friction. This is the reason it's law, because if we specifically take into account that it would keep going without that friction, and we only account for that friction, we can predict where it will end up.
Wow.
That doesn't make it a law. That doesn't mean that.
Did that just come out of your mouth, dude?
Dude, it's like you think that I'm saying that prediction equates to the truth of a cause claim. That isn't my position. My position is that the evidence suggests, based on what we have access to, there is nothing else involved. So you're trying to flip it around and say we need to give you evidence.
But you're flipping it around.
No,
You're
that's
the
what
one
you think.
flipping
I'm
it,
trying
bro.
to explain
You're the
to you why that isn't the case, though.
You're saying, oh, this is a law. You're saying that this is a law because I can point out the impossibility of it in our reality. That's exactly what you just said. No, that's exactly what you just said.
Okay.
So-
No, the point
Yeah,
is
let me
that
not-
the point is that all the evidence we have access to support that's what natural laws are, bro.
Well, we're discussing this. The reason this whole conversation started is because we're discussing the stuff we don't have access to, which is why the argument of either gravity, ether, or rising came up in the first place.
There's nothing detectable. Okay, there's nothing at all detectable other than friction involved when you can apply the things called tension dials, right? You twist a little bit, now it's twice as tenser, resulting in twice the amount of friction. It's all incredibly consistent at twice the friction. Oh wow, it spins for twice or half the time, right? Quadruple, a quarter of the time. There's nothing there that seems to be playing a role in stopping a rotating body in a vacuum. If you like,
So you do believe in vacuums?
Can I ask SC a question?
Straightforward.
No, do you not get that the diligent side is the one that has went and looked at all scenarios, and all of them have shown the only thing you need to account for is the friction. You're claiming there's something else, though.
Yeah, you guys are making this too complicated. Can we just ask SC something? SC, let's say, so the reason this is hard for you to believe, and like, yeah, it's hard. We've obviously never seen it, is because there's always Earth's gravity. There's always like a medium. So like SC, if let's pretend like space, like there's a real, like let's pretend we're in a vacuum, right? There's nothing in it, and there's no Earth. There's nothing pulling anything, no gravity, right? What do you think would happen with something that's moving? You think it would eventually stop? Like, what would be stopping it?
See, that's the problem. You've been convinced that in a magical place called a vacuum,
But we're making up this scenario where this magical place exists.
Not being convinced
Go
of a
your
real
fantasy
location.
La
It's
La
just
Land.
the ability
No
to
problem.
entertain an
So there's
idea.
friction is a
Maybe you
vacuum.
could interrupt me while I talk. Maybe that'll work. I don't know.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. Whether you have to create the fantasy place or not, the logical end game of the implication of that would have to be that it wouldn't stop, and that's the point.
And the
What's
irony is
No,
that
you've been
you're
convinced of
asking us
that.
you're asking me you're asking me to entertain the same scenario where there is no friction, and you're making the claim that it would stop anyway. Do you understand? You don't get to pick and choose. You're making a claim that's not accessible right now either. You're saying that in a scenario where there was a vacuum, the object would stop anyway because
No, no, bro. Listen,
what we have
no.
access to shows us that it's the friction that stops it, and we know exactly what that relationship is. We can quantify it, we can measure it, we can observe it. It's empirical. We can prove that that is a direct relationship with how fast something slows down or stops. You're saying no, even if you were to pull that out of the equation, it still would slow down.
Negative. Let me see if I can get a sentence out without being interrupted. Okay. What I'm questioning is the law that claims that something will travel forever until a force acts upon it, right? Now, this claimed force is supposed to be gravity. Now, I can go and ask you, which gravity? What do you mean? But that's irrelevant. The claim is something, hold on. The claim is something happens in a vacuum that we've never seen, therefore making it a law. That, to me, that is an oxymoron. Sorry.
Do you see what my rebuttal to you is that your
Gravity
claim
has
also
nothing to do
required
with it, man.
my
Gravity has
rebuttal is
nothing to do with it.
I think
I
it's the
agree.
opposite.
My
I think it's
rebuttal.
Gravity has everything to. What do you mean? Gravity has nothing? Has everything to do with it in that
No,
Okay, but
model.
SC, please don't drown out my point here, SC. But my rebuttal
Friction
is that
exists
to
without
make your
gravity.
SC. My position is to make your claim. You have to invoke the same scenario.
Would it be like a law to
Well,
say
fair enough, but
Hey
or
guys,
SC?
can
Would it
we
be a
just
law
let
to
SC
say
and
that?
Witsit go back and forth for a second, guys? Can we just let
Thank
them
you.
go back and forth? It seemed obvious
I
they
was in
were
the middle
going
of
back and
something.
forth. Okay, yeah, we're just doing some quick temporary mutes. There's a lot of people in the room, so we got to have the audio clean. Go ahead, let's let Witsit and SC just finish that. Go ahead, guys.
Do you see what I'm saying though, SC? Like it's so I hear what you're saying, but then if you describe the other side of it, you have to also invoke that same fairy tale scenario that we've never seen because you're claiming that it would slow down anyway. So the reason it's a law is because like based on everything that we do have access to without invoking that scenario, that fairy tale scenario that no one's ever seen, right? We see that the only thing that stops the object is the friction, right? The resistance. So like that's why it's a law. We can accurately predict where objects are going to be. We know how it's going to work. We can observe it. It's empirical. So to claim that no actually would stop on its own in a vacuum, you still have to invoke that idealistic perfect vacuum.
I get that. I hear where you're coming from, but isn't it that the gravity? You're saying it's the friction now, but isn't it based on gravity?
Well,
Not
no,
necessarily. You can have friction without gravity.
just resistance. Specifically, it's just resistance, whatever form that takes. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
objects do have weight, of course.
To either of you guys, would somebody disagree that it's a law that something is in motion is always stopped by an outside force? Is that a law? Something that always occurs?
Well, that is what the law of conservation of energy
That's fair.
says.
Yeah, but I can tell you what force then. What force are you bringing into play here? See, that force is gravity. You can't say the force is friction unless you
Why?
want to change it, right?
Well, there's a force. No. There's a force within whatever is causing resistance as well. There's an interaction.
Yeah, of course, but we're talking about this law, right?
Mm-hmm. No, it doesn't
This
say
law of
gravity in the
conservation
law.
of
The law
momentum,
is
right? Based
the law
on
is-
what?
the law's not about gravity. The law is
I
not
would-
about
I would-
gravity.
Yeah, I would just say that it seems to be the case that every single time there's an object in motion, it's being stopped by something, being air resistance, water resistance, a wall, something.
Yeah,
every
I'm open
single
to
time.
it being wrong,
Yep.
but it just seems like it requires special pleading, and I don't go like that's the reason that I think the ether position's so strong is because waves always require medium, etc. In theory, could you have something waving that didn't have a medium? I mean, I don't know. I get like
Okay, put it
that's
this way. What's it? Can we disprove it? Can we disprove this?
No, probably
That
not.
would be a no, right? Yeah.
No.
So there you go.
We
I
disproved
mean,
the second law, SC.
Well, can we prove it?
I mean,
Well,
I
we
don't
can.
know. I don't know. Can we prove the second
Laws
law?
are not
Can we-
meant to be proven or disproven,
That's
right? So
my
the fact that we're
point. That's my
disputing this
point.
is like, you
That's
know?
my point. It's like someone disputing the second law. That's my point. And that's the caliber of strength of the argument against whatever the position is. Right now, it's upward moving Earth. I use the law of conservation of energy against the spinning globe. But like
Yeah,
it's
but
the same
bro,
thing. It's like the reason the second law is one of our strongest arguments is because it's the second law. It isn't about whether or not you agree with it. It isn't an agreeable thing. It's objectively what's always observed. That's why it's a law, right? And a natural law. And that's important. That's why it just is a death blow to the globe. Same thing here. I don't see how we can pick and choose to kind of like
well,
pretend that everything's the opposite of what we experience and the Earth's moving, even though it appears to be stationary. You know.
look, my beef is the fact that they say that something will travel forever. That's my beef, right? So it goes in with this Newton stuff. So and then we have the other one with the force that each opposite reaction, right? That if you push something, it pushes back on you. That's another nonsense where they say the wall pushes back on you. So forgive me, but I got a beef with Newton and his laws, you know? So I'm
What would
sorry,
you?
man.
Is it just a definitional issue? What would you? What would you? I mean, it's something that we can all affirm always is the case. What else? Is there a different word? Is it just the word?
No, you can never show that it's the case. You can never show me something traveling forever, and you can't show me a wall pushing back on me. So I'm sorry, man. I mean,
I can. No, not that. I mean,
You
I
agree
can
it's
show you a
divided.
wall
Do you
I can
agree
show
it's
you a wall pushing back on you. I can show you a wall pushing back on you easily.
Oh, you can?
Yeah.
Can you please show me?
Yeah, I can describe it to you really simply.
You can describe it to me. Go ahead.
Okay. Now let's just take this infinitely stiff, firm wall that you're probably thinking of in your mind and turn it into something, because everything is elastic. So let's just add a little bit more elasticity into it than you're probably thinking. All right. So you gotta.
Not a wall.
No, I'm talking about a wall. I'm talking about let's take some like hinges, lock them into place on the floor, and strap a 10-foot by 10-foot square, maybe like an inch thick of plywood. You push on that wall, it's going to bend. But if to the amount of force that you're going to push on that wall, it's going to be elastically conserving all that effort pushing back at you because you can't just tip it over, right? And so if you could place a ball on that and somehow just disappear, it would fling that ball back in your direction at the exact amount of force that you were pushing on it with. So yeah, the wall is pushing back on you. It's much easier to see with something with a little bit of elasticity, but what's not acknowledged is the amount of torque on the root of the wall on the earth.
What I see is the amount of magic being played on people. Let me give you an example. I have a wall here. I'll put a ball next to it. If I push the ball and I push the wall with the same force, we're both going to move equally?
No, SE.
What?
The equal and opposite reaction. The equal and opposite reaction to you pushing on a wall would be your feet pushing off of the floor to exert that force. So your
the wall is also pushing off the floor. It's called torque.
Your feet would be pushing in the opposite direction on the floor that you're pushing against the wall. Equal and opposite.
So the wall sitting there is pushing back at me.
Yeah, but all its strength is all of its energy is located on the fulcrum of where it's connected to the ground. There's an extreme amount of torque pressure where however it's located in attached to the ground.
So I'm doing all the pushing. The wall did not push at all. Zero. The wall pushed zero back at me, correct?
The elasticity and the firmness at the point where it's attached to the ground is pushing right back at you, man.
There's a tension involved.
Yeah, it's less about the wall moving, it's more about the energy you put in. So either the wall's going to break or you're going to push back.
So every molecule in that wall is essentially trying to hold itself together, right? If you don't overcome that, if you do overcome it, you say you break the wall. But if you don't break the wall, that tension wants to then return back to its normative state. And this is what they mean by the wall pushing back upon you, because you haven't overcome the structure of the wall itself. Does that make sense?
Another play on words.
Resistance. You haven't overcome resistance. So
yeah, I don't think you can call it push.
It's best understood just replacing the wall with like a really fucking giant, huge, muscular dude. Like if you push against a dude and he's like a super big guy, you may not think that he's pushing back, but he is. He's just very heavy and he's very, you just got it like
an analogy because the guy would be pushing with his like calves and the wall is just kind of really sturdy and stuck. Like it's not pushing.
No, it is. At the location it's attached to the ground. That's where all the torque is like most I don't know. Whatever you want to call it, right? There's an extreme amount of torque at the fulcrum where the wall is attached to the ground, and it is.
Ball was back, right?
it goes back. You're not overpowering the wall, right? It has like a much higher structural integrity.
But like, if a stone wall is like completely solid where you could never like squish it, like, would you guys claim it's pushing?
The big question for me in that timeline is, why didn't we do it sooner? Why did it take so long? Why did we wait until